Now, human rights group Black Sash is concerned that the closure of pay points at Postbank will have a devastating impact on grant beneficiaries. Postbank has announced that grant recipients will no longer be able to use the post office for cash withdrawals of their grants as of next year. Now, social grant beneficiaries who currently make use of the cash withdrawal system and cash payment points will now be required to use their Sassa Gold Cards to facilitate transactions at retail points or bank ATMs. However, Black Sash also says that this move will have a tragic effect on grant recipients in rural areas. So to discuss this matter further, we joined virtually now by Postbank spokesperson Dr. Bongani Diako, as well as Black Sash's regional manager for KwaZulu-Natal Evashnee Naidu. Thanks so much to both of you for joining us this morning for, of course, a very important conversation. But let me start with you, Dr. Diako, by just finding out the announcement was, of course, made this week, and as per the announcement, it says that the cash payment of grants will be phased out by March next year. But what led to this decision?
Yeah, good morning and good morning to the viewers at home. So this wasn't a Postbank decision alone. This is a decision we took jointly with Sassa. Actually, the decision to phase out the physical pay points was taken way back in 2018. And over time, the process has been unfolding where some of the cash pay points were closed, either because beneficiaries themselves have migrated to alternative pay points. So we are now doing what one can call the sweep of the remainder of beneficiaries that are still using physical pay points and the post office branches, migrating them then to the NPS channels. That has been meant, or it's still meant to provide improved customer service to all the social grants beneficiaries.
So, Dr. Diako, as you say, you are now doing the final sweep. How many beneficiaries are still making use of these services?
So 136,979 beneficiaries are using the physical cash pay points, right? And then 161,419 beneficiaries are using the payments inside post office branches across South Africa.
So we're talking in excess of 300,000 beneficiaries.
In excess, that's correct.
So are you able to just give us an indication of where exactly these beneficiaries are making use of the services?
They are across the country. Most of them, the provinces include Gauteng, the Eastern Cape, KZN, Limpopo are some of the provinces that have bigger numbers. So in terms of the physical cash pay points, we are currently dealing with 894 physical cash pay points across the country. Now, with regards to the post office, you'll recall that when in 2018 the post office started paying grants, there was a footprint of over 2,000 branches across South Africa. That branch network has really shrunk naturally over time. We are currently dealing with around 819 branches, and the announcement from the BRPs this week was that they're going to further scale it by 200 branches.
So, Ms. Naidu, if I can come to you, Black Sash has raised concern over this decision to stop the grant withdrawals, the cash withdrawals from post office branches or cash pay points. So just speak to us about your concern in this regard.
Thanks, Sakina. So obviously we've been aware that this decision was on the cards because, as the Postbank colleague says, this was a decision that was taken in 2018. But the challenge that we're facing, and this is also where there's some discrepancies, because the numbers seem to fluctuate in terms of who's giving the stats as well. Because in the last meeting that we had, there was an amount of about 450,000 people across the country that were affected. So the amount was 300,000 that were doing over-the-counter services with post offices, and around plus minus 150,000 that were going to cash pay points. Now, the challenge that we're finding, and the Black Sash has just completed production on a documentary which has been following the impact of the closure of cash pay points on beneficiaries, that even since 2018, where these cash pay points have closed, beneficiaries are still facing massive impact in terms of travel costs, a fear of technology, being robbed, especially with these challenges that we've had over the last couple of months, the most tragic being the September technical glitch, where around 500,000 to 600,000 beneficiaries didn't get their grants, had to sleep over at pay sites, had to travel back multiple times to get their grants, etc. These are the challenges that those that have been holding on to those Sassa cards have been fearful of using these national payment system infrastructure. The other challenge is that South Africa is an unequal society. There is no one size fits all. So we're hoping that with this transition, which we understand has to take place, but that Sassa and Postbank have put in place a transitional plan that will leave no one behind and will ensure that the most vulnerable, particularly those that have held on to these cash pay points and over-the-counter services, are walked with in terms of this journey to transition, and their safety and security and their dignity in the way they access their grants is protected as we go forward.
So let's speak to the how, because Black Sash is also calling for the grant recipients who receive their cash at pay points and post offices to be better accommodated. But how do you propose this is done, Ms. Naidu?
So, for instance, because of the major travel costs, we're not sure how the actual implementation is going to take place, because the mapping is unfortunately still happening at a national level in terms of particularly those rural areas. Where is their closest national payment infrastructure? For some communities, the post office was the only payment infrastructure that they had. They didn't even have a retailer or an ATM in the community. And so if they're 40 kilometers, 60 kilometers, 80 kilometers away from the nearest town, how is that going to impact them? A beneficiary that's 92 years old, who's never traveled to town in his life, who's never transacted on an ATM, how are you as Sassa and Postbank going to support that beneficiary from going to an ATM and being able to withdraw their grant without fear or being mugged or any of the other challenges that other beneficiaries may be privy to? So for us, the issue of the implementation is very critical, and we want to get the recommendations from Sassa and Postbank as to how this will happen. Will they be able to bring infrastructure into these particular communities that are very, very vulnerable and far from national payment infrastructure footprints?
So, Dr. Diako, you did say that these plans have been tabled since 2018. So what exactly are the plans to assist those who receive grants, who live in rural areas and who are far from economic hubs?
Yeah. So let me start with the one on the numbers, because we have to clear it and speak to the integrity of the numbers. The numbers we're speaking about now, it's the numbers for the payments for the last payment cycle. That's the numbers we are presenting on the table. So the Sassa card, and it is correct that the numbers fluctuate month to month, and that is because the Sassa card is an interoperable product which works across the NPS. So beneficiaries have a choice to use it at the CPPs. Beneficiaries have a choice to use it at the ATMs, and they use it at the retailers, either to make purchases or even withdrawals. So from month to month, you will have a certain months where the numbers at the CPPs are higher and the branches. In certain months, the numbers will be lower. So that explains the fluctuation in terms of the numbers. And in terms of the how, what we have done collectively with Sassa we've done our geo mapping on the ground to identify alternatives at each place where we are closing. So some places are nearby a major retailer, as Fatima has indicated, and there are those smaller retailers that include your spaza shops that have a point of sale. So we are not going to do the close out process in a method that's not taking into account the impact of the user, because the outcome that we want to achieve is to improve the quality of the services. And Black Sash and us are looking for the same outcome, and we do have forums where we engage on these matters. So in the phased approach, as we implement the closures, we have made it a point to ensure that every point where we are closing, there are alternatives, either the major retailers, the ATMs, and the small retailers, because beneficiaries can use the card to make purchases. And in terms of the distances, what we have found is that beneficiaries, out of customer behavior habits, they would withdraw the cash at the CPP, get into a taxi for 20, 30 kilometers and go to their spend point, which is the major retailer. So what we are trying to do is inculcate a culture of them maybe making that single trip, going to that spend point, either purchase with the card and withdraw with the money instead of losing a day as part of the customer experience improvement.
So here's my concern, Dr. Diako. All is good and well, but when you say that you've actually looked at alternatives that will be in place once these services are withdrawn, are you absolutely certain that that will exist? If there is a Kumalo sitting somewhere in a far-flung area, Lingana, somewhere in the outskirts, and are you absolutely certain that she will have an alternative come the end of March when you stop these services and she was making use of that particular system for her money? Because for me, it's about the people who are worst affected. Even if it is 1, 2, 3 grannies sitting somewhere, you cannot leave them. And I would hope that you've taken into consideration the worst case scenarios here and you've absolutely made sure that they will be accommodated.
No, certainly no one is going to be left out, because these are our key customers, right? And the decision is not made for convenience of either Postbank or Sassa. It's meant for their convenience. The CPPs are a big challenge, right? Some of the CPPs beneficiaries are actually paid in open fields. Now, we've got a dependency also on the CIT companies. Most of the time, the data that we have received, most of the time the CIT company arrives late. In some instances, the CIT company doesn't arrive at all for one reason or another, and people don't have payment certainty. In relation to the SAPO branches as well, the branches are not really geared to carry the numbers, and also with the challenges of SAPO undergoing a BRP itself, there isn't payment certainty. So what we are implementing now is for the benefit of the beneficiaries, and we've put all measures to ensure no one is left out. If we do encounter instances that would require us to identify any other person that may be adversely impacted by this decision, we've put contingencies for that.
Well, we're out of time as we can hear the bed music coming up, but just very briefly, Ms. Naidu, the cost factor in terms of how much it costs to withdraw that money.
So definitely, we understand it is not cost effective to bring cash into communities. But then the question becomes, if Postbank is moving everybody into the national payment infrastructure, why then are we paying Postbank for what services? So shouldn't the government then use the money more effectively and efficiently to then look at transport for beneficiaries in rural areas, covering bank charges for and moving everybody into the banking system, and other alternatives for bringing services into communities so beneficiaries do not face the burden of traveling out?
Well, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you so much to our guests this morning, Dr. Bongani Diako, Postbank spokesperson, and Evashnee Naidu, who's Black Sash's regional manager for KwaZulu-Natal, speaking about the post office who will stop cash payments of social grants by March next year.